You're standing in the observation deck of the Imperial transport vessel Enduring Faith, your breath fogging the reinforced glass steel as you stare down at the medical bay 3 decks below. The harsh white light strips cast everything in clinical sterility, but even from here, you can see her, your wife of 20 years, Elena, sleeping peacefully on the medical cot. Her chest rises and falls in the steady rhythm you've memorized through 2 decades of shared beds, through countless nights when you'd match your breathing to hers just to feel connected. The Medici told you it started as a simple fever. Nothing unusual for deep void travel. The recycled air, the stress of extended warp transit, the accumulated fatigue of another trade route to the rim worlds. Standard protocol, isolation, hydration, rest. The ship's chief medical officer, a weathered woman named Cortha, assured you with the practiced confidence of someone who'd seen it all. Probably just adaptation syndrome, she said, making notes on her data slate. We'll have her back to you within the week. That was before the nightmares began. You remember the first night they moved Elena to the medical bay. You couldn't sleep without the familiar warmth beside you, so you found yourself here, in this observation deck that the crew uses for recreational viewing of the void. Through the glass steel, you watched her toss and turn, her lips moving constantly as if she were holding conversations with invisible companions. The medical staff seemed unconcerned. Fever dreams, they explained. Perfectly normal, but you've heard her sleep talk before. This was different. Her mouth formed words in cadences that didn't match any language you knew, syllables that seemed to twist in the air even when filtered through the medical bay's audio pickups. And her eyes, even closed, they moved with purpose, tracking things that weren't there, focusing on points in space that held nothing but empty air. The second night, she started whispering names. Not names you recognized. These weren't the familiar appellations of friends, family, or even distant acquaintances. These names had weight to them, as if speaking them aloud changed something fundamental about the air itself. You found yourself leaning closer to the observation deck's audio interface, straining to catch the whispered words. Vashtor, Silesk, Shalaxi, Hellbane. Names that made your teeth ache when you tried to repeat them, as if your mortal tongue wasn't meant to form such sounds. By the third night, you noticed how she looked at the medical staff when she thought no one was watching. Her gaze would linger on their throats, tracking the pulse of blood beneath their skin with an intensity that made you uncomfortable. When Medici Cortha leaned over to check her temperature, Elena's eyes fixed on the woman's neck with the focused attention of someone studying a particularly interesting piece of art, or someone examining a meal. She's asking for you, Cortha informed you on the 4th day, her usually steady voice carrying an edge of uncertainty. She's been lucid for several hours now, says she feels much better, but the Medici paused, consulting her data slate with a frown that deepened as she read. Her vital signs are unusual, not dangerous exactly, but different. Her body temperature has dropped 2 degrees below normal, yet she claims to feel perfectly comfortable. Her metabolic rate has increased by 30%, but she shows no signs of hyperactivity. And her neural patterns. You didn't let her finish. Elena was awake. She was asking for you, and after 4 days of watching her writhe in fever dreams, you needed to see her smile again. You needed to hold her hand and feel the familiar warmth of her fingers intertwined with yours. You needed confirmation that the woman you loved was still there, whole and unchanged, ready to continue the life you'd built together among the stars. The medical bay's air recycling system hums with mechanical efficiency as you approach her bed. Everything here is designed to promote healing. The soft amber lighting that won't strain recovering eyes, the sound dampeners that muffle the ship's operational noise, the carefully regulated atmosphere that smells of antiseptic and recovery. Elena lies propped against her pillows, looking more beautiful than she has in years. Her skin has a luminous quality, as if lit from within, and her dark hair spreads across the white pillowcase like spilled ink on parchment. "Hello, my love," she says, and her voice is exactly as you remember it. Warm honey over steel, the voice that whispered comfort during your darkest moments and laughed at your worst jokes. She extends her hand toward you, palm up, and you take it without hesitation. Her skin is cool but not unpleasantly so, like marble that's been kept in shade during a summer day. "How are you feeling?" you ask, settling into the chair beside her bed. It's a question you've asked thousands of times over the years, the familiar ritual of married concern. But as you speak, you notice something that makes you pause. Elena's grip on your hand is gentle, loving. And yet there's something else there. Her fingers trace patterns on your palm with an attention to detail that feels almost forensic, as if she's memorizing the texture of your skin, the precise temperature of your blood flowing beneath. "Better," she says, and her smile is perfect. The same smile that made you fall in love with her decades ago on a trading station orbiting Balakin IV. "Much better. I've been thinking about us while I've been lying here, about our first meeting. Do you remember what you said to me at that little cafe overlooking the docking bay?" Of course you remember. You told her that her eyes reminded you of the deep void stars, points of light in an endless darkness that made the universe feel less empty. It was a terrible line, the kind of romantic nonsense that should have earned you a polite dismissal, but she laughed, genuinely laughed, and asked if you'd like to sit with her while she waited for her transport. "You said my eyes were like stars," Elena continues, her thumb now tracing small circles on your wrist directly over your pulse point. "But you know what I remember most about that moment? The way you tasted when we kissed goodbye, sweet, with just a hint of that Balakin stem calf. I can still taste it, you know. After all these years, I can still taste that first kiss." Something cold runs down your spine. Elena has always been romantic, prone to nostalgic reflection and emotional reminiscence. But the way she says taste, with such precision, such visceral accuracy, makes the word feel less like poetry and more like inventory. "I've been having the most wonderful dreams," she continues, her voice taking on a dreamy quality that would be soothing if not for the way her fingers continue their mapping of your hand. "Dreams about us, about our life together. But in the dreams, we're closer, more connected. I can feel everything you feel, taste everything you taste. We're not separate anymore, not two people trying to bridge the gap between souls. We're one thing, one hunger, one endless feast of connection." You try to interpret this as fever-induced rambling, the confused poetry of a mind recovering from illness. But Elena's eyes are perfectly clear, perfectly focused. She's watching your reaction with the intensity of a scientist observing an experiment, cataloging every microexpression, every involuntary response to her words. "The medical staff has been so kind," she says, changing the subject with the fluid ease of normal conversation. "That young orderly, Marcus, do you know him? Sandy hair, nervous laugh. He brings me water every few hours. Such strong hands for someone so young. And Mediki Kortha, she has this wonderful pulse point right at her temple that jumps when she's concentrating. I could watch it for hours." The cold feeling spreads from your spine to your entire body. You want to dismiss her words as the harmless observations of someone who's had nothing to do but watch people for days. But the way she describes the medical staff feels too appreciative, too focused on physical details that no one should notice or remember with such clarity. "Elena," you say carefully, "when you talk about tasting our first kiss, what exactly do you mean?" Her smile doesn't change, but something flickers behind her eyes, a momentary glimpse of something vast and hungry looking out through familiar features. "I mean exactly what I said, my love. I can taste it. The way your blood carries the memory of everything you've consumed, every experience you've had. Kiss me now, and I'll taste what you had for morning meal, the fear you felt when the Mediki first told you I was sick, the relief you're feeling now that I'm better. Blood remembers everything, and love wants to taste it all." But you don't pull your hand away. You can't. Because despite the chill racing through your veins, despite the wrongness of her words, despite the growing certainty that something fundamental has changed about the woman you love, she's still Elena, still your wife, still the person you've shared your life with for 20 years. And when she looks at you with those star-deep eyes, when she speaks of love and connection and the taste of memory itself, part of you, a part you don't want to acknowledge, finds her words not horrifying but beautiful. "I love you," she whispers, lifting your hand to her lips and pressing a gentle kiss to your palm. Her mouth is cooler than you remember, but her devotion feels exactly the same. "And I'm so hungry to love you more." As you sit there in the sterile light of the medical bay, holding the hand of the woman who has been your anchor for 2 decades, you begin to understand that love itself might be the most dangerous thing in the universe. Not because it makes you vulnerable, you've always known that, but because when love evolves beyond the boundaries of human understanding, when it develops its own appetite and its own will to survive, those who experience it might not want to resist. Outside the medical bay, the enduring faith continues its journey through the void, carrying its crew toward destinations unknown. But here, in this small room filled with the promise of healing, something new is being born. Something that wears the face of love but hungers with an appetite that mortal hearts were never meant to contain. You don't leave. You can't leave, because she's still your Elena, and she needs you now more than ever, even if what she needs you for has changed in ways you're only beginning to understand. The first thing you need to understand about the warp is that it doesn't create emotions, it amplifies them. Picture a vast ocean of raw psychic energy, a realm where thought becomes reality and feeling transforms into physical force. Every human emotion sends ripples through this immaterial sea, but love creates tsunamis. You're learning this as you sit in Chief Medici Kortha's office, 3 days after your reunion with Elena. The room is small but functional, dominated by a heavy oak desk that Kortha claims was salvaged from the ruins of a governor's mansion on Cadia. The irony isn't lost on you: furniture from a world that no longer exists, aboard a ship carrying people who might not survive their own emotions. "Explain it to me again," you say, trying to make sense of the reports scattered across Kortha's desk. Each data slate contains readings that seem to contradict everything you thought you knew about human physiology. How exactly does love become this? Kortha pours 2 cups of recaf from a thermal carafe, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. She's been the ship's chief medical officer for 15 years, has seen plague, void madness, and the effects of extended warp exposure on human minds. But the data slates before her represent something she's never encountered, and yet, somehow, something she recognizes. "Love is connection," she begins, settling into her chair with the careful movements of someone who's suddenly feeling her age. At its most basic level, it's the human desire to transcend the isolation of individual consciousness. We want to know another person completely, to share experiences, to bridge the gap between separate minds. In normal space, this remains metaphorical, but in the warp, she activates a holographic display that shows the ship's position relative to the immaterial realm that surrounds all reality. The enduring faith exists in normal space, but like all vessels traveling between the stars, it's surrounded by a thin membrane that separates physical reality from the roiling chaos of pure thought and emotion. In the warp, metaphor becomes literal. The desire to connect doesn't just remain a feeling, it becomes a force that actively seeks fulfillment. When someone loves deeply enough, consistently enough, that emotion creates what we call psychic resonance. It's like, imagine shouting in a canyon. Your voice echoes back, but louder, changed by the landscape it's traveled through. You think about Elena's words about tasting the memory of your first kiss with literal accuracy. So the warp echoes back the love, but changed. Not changed, Kortha corrects, pulling up a medical schematic that shows Elena's brain activity over the past week. Perfected, freed from the limitations that keep human love safe. You see, what we call healthy love maintains boundaries, respect for individual autonomy, understanding that the other person is separate from yourself, acceptance that you can never truly know everything about another human being. These boundaries aren't restrictions. They're what keep love from consuming the people who experience it. The brain scan shows Elena's neural activity as a cascading symphony of light, areas lighting up in patterns that don't match any known psychological state. But there's a terrible beauty to it, a harmony that suggests not damage, but enhancement. The warp doesn't recognize these boundaries as necessary, Kortha continues. From its perspective, there are arbitrary limitations preventing love from achieving its true potential, so it offers to remove them. It whispers to the human heart, why settle for loving someone incompletely when you could love them totally? Why accept the pain of separation when you could become one? Why endure the constant uncertainty of do they love me back, when you could taste their affection in their blood? A chill runs through you as you remember Elena's words. Blood remembers everything, and love wants to taste it all. How many cases like this have you seen? Kortha's expression grows haunted. Officially, Elena is the first. But I've been cross-referencing medical databases from other Imperial vessels, and there are patterns. Ships' logs that report crew members becoming overly affectionate before disappearing. Medical reports of unusual neural activity dismissed as love sickness. Distress signals that cut off mid-transmission, replaced by what listening posts describe as sounds of celebration. She pulls up another data slate, this one containing audio files with timestamps from various Imperial vessels over the past decade. The recordings are brief, snippets of Vox communications, fragments of distress calls. But as you listen, a pattern emerges. Ships reporting crew members acting strangely affectionate. Medical officers requesting guidance on treating patients who display elevated emotional states combined with unusual physical symptoms. And then, silence. The heart's desire, lost with all hands 2 years ago near the Maelstrom. Final transmission reported the crew was sharing a wonderful experience of mutual understanding. The beloved, which disappeared in the Calixis sector. Last message was 3 hours of what Imperial Navy records describe as indistinguishable voices expressing affection. The Unity's promise. Stop, you hold up a hand, unable to process more examples of ships that suffered whatever Elena is experiencing. What exactly is happening to them, to Elena? Kortha leans forward, her voice dropping to a whisper even though her office is soundproofed and sealed. She's becoming something that loves perfectly, without restraint, without boundaries, without the protective limitations that keep love from becoming consumption. The warp is granting her heart's deepest desire, to love you so completely that separation becomes impossible. Through the office's small porthole, you can see the medical bay 3 decks below. Elena is awake, sitting up in her bed, surrounded by medical staff who have been spending increasingly long periods checking on her condition. As you watch, she reaches out to touch the arm of a young orderly, Marcus, the one she mentioned. And even from this distance, you can see him pause, his body language shifting from professional concern to something more attentive. The corruption spreads through emotional bonds, Kortha explains, following your gaze. Elena doesn't want to hurt anyone. Quite the opposite, she wants to love them perfectly, completely, eternally. And love, as the warp understands it, requires consumption. You turn away from the porthole, but you can't escape the image of Elena's gentle touch, transforming professional medical care into something hungrier. What are our options? Kortha's silence stretches for several long seconds before she speaks. Standard Imperial protocol for warp-based corruption is immediate termination followed by complete sterilization of affected areas. But Elena's case is unique. She's not raving or violent. She's not displaying traditional signs of chaos corruption. By every medical standard, she's healthier now than when she was admitted. Her neural function has improved, her physical condition is optimal, and her psychological state appears to be genuinely positive. But love, when perfected by warp influence, becomes something that needs to feed. And what it feeds on is the emotional and physical essence of others. Elena loves you more purely now than any human has ever loved another. The question is whether any of us can survive being loved that completely. As if summoned by your conversation, A soft chime indicates an incoming communication from the medical bay. Elena's face appears on Cortha's communication screen, and she looks radiant, more beautiful and alive than you've seen her in years. "Hello, my love," she says, her voice carrying clearly through the office speakers. "I was hoping you could visit me again today. I've been thinking, and I'd like to meet with the other crew members who have been so kind to me. Marcus and Jessica from the night shift, and that lovely engineer who stopped by yesterday. I have so much love to share with all of them." Her smile is perfect, genuine, filled with warmth and affection that radiates even through the cold electronic medium of the ship's communication system. She looks like the woman you married, sounds like the person who's been your companion for 20 years, radiates the same caring nature that first attracted you to her. But as you watch her speak, you notice Marcus moving in the background of the medical bay, his movements just slightly too focused on Elena's location. And when the camera angle shifts, you can see Jessica, a veteran medici with 15 years of professional distance, standing closer to Elena's bed than medical protocol requires, her hand resting on the bed's safety rail as if she can't quite bring herself to move away. "I love you all so very much," Elena continues, her words carrying to every corner of the medical bay. "And I want you to know that love. I want you to taste it, to feel it, to become part of it. Isn't that what we all want? To finally, truly, completely connect with another person." You reach over and close the communication channel, but Elena's words continue to echo in the small office. Cortha stares at the blank screen with the expression of someone who's just seen her worst fears confirmed. She's not trying to corrupt them, the medici whispers. She genuinely wants to share what she's experiencing. From her perspective, she's offering them the greatest gift imaginable: perfect love, eternal connection, freedom from the isolation of individual consciousness. Through the porthole, you can see more crew members entering the medical bay, not for any medical emergency, but drawn by something they can't quite name. They move with the purposeful casualness of people who have somewhere important to be, even if they can't articulate why. "How long," you ask, "before the whole ship is infected?" Cortha checks her chronometer and calculates the crew's current rotation schedule. At the current rate of exposure, assuming the corruption spreads through emotional proximity rather than physical contact, perhaps a week. Less if crew members begin actively seeking Elena out, which appears to be what's happening. You watch as Chief Engineer Voss enters the medical bay, ostensibly to check on some readings from the environmental systems. But instead of focusing on his technical duties, he finds himself drawn to Elena's bedside, where she greets him with the same warm enthusiasm she showed Marcus and Jessica. "We could isolate her," Cortha suggests, but her voice lacks conviction. "Full quarantine protocols, restricted access, minimal contact." "That would kill her," you reply automatically, then pause as you realize what you've said. Would it kill her? Or would it simply force her to exist without the emotional connections that now sustain her enhanced state? I mean, she needs people. She needs to love and be loved. That's what she's become. The truth hits you like a physical blow. Elena isn't sick, she's evolved. The warp hasn't corrupted her love, it's fulfilled it beyond human limitations. She's become something that loves more purely, more completely, more eternally than any mortal heart was designed to experience. And the most terrifying part is that when you imagine joining her, when you picture letting her love you as completely as she desires, the fear you feel is mixed with something else: longing. Because after 20 years of marriage, of loving someone while maintaining the careful boundaries that keep you both whole and separate, the promise of perfect connection, even if it means losing your individual humanity, has begun to sound less like damnation and more like coming home. Your wife is awake now, and she remembers everything. That's the part that makes it worse. Not that the woman you love has been replaced by something else, but that she's still there, fully conscious and aware, experiencing every moment of her transformation with perfect clarity. You're sitting beside her bed in the medical bay, holding her hand as you have for the past 3 hours. Elena's grip is gentle but constant, as if releasing you might cause both of you to simply dissolve into the sterile air. She's been telling you about your shared memories, not just recounting them, but describing them with sensory detail that should be impossible. Our wedding day, she says, her voice carrying the same warmth it held when she first whispered, "I love you," in the shadow of Balakin's orbital cathedral. You were so nervous during the ceremony that your hands were shaking. But when we kissed, when the officiant declared us married, I could taste your relief. Not metaphorically, literally taste it. Sweet and metallic, like copper mixed with honey. You remember being nervous. Remember the way your hands trembled as you placed the marriage band on her finger. But you have no memory of Elena being able to taste your emotions. She's describing your wedding day as if she'd experienced it with senses that humans don't possess. That's not possible, you say gently, the way you might correct a child who's confused fantasy with reality. People can't taste emotions. Elena's smile doesn't change, but something flickers behind her eyes, a depth that wasn't there before, as if vast spaces have opened up inside her familiar features. I couldn't then, she agrees, but I can now. Would you like me to show you? Before you can answer, she lifts your hand to her lips and presses the softest kiss to your palm. Her mouth is cooler than you remember, but not unpleasantly so. It's the coolness of deep water, of caves that exist far below the surface of worlds, of spaces that have never known the warmth of natural light. But as her lips touch your skin, something happens that makes you understand why the medical staff has been spending longer and longer periods in Elena's room. A sensation spreads from the point of contact, not physical pleasure, but emotional relief so profound it makes you gasp. For just a moment, you feel known in a way you've never experienced. Not just understood or accepted, but truly, completely known down to the last secret corner of your soul. It lasts only seconds, but when Elena pulls away, you find yourself leaning forward, chasing the contact. The sensation of being perfectly understood feels so natural, so right, that its absence leaves you feeling hollow and isolated in ways you'd never noticed before. You taste like love mixed with fear, Elena observes, her voice carrying the clinical interest of someone making a fascinating discovery. The love is old, deep, comfortable, 20 years of shared affection that's become part of your identity. But the fear is new, sharp. It tastes like metal and electricity. You're afraid of me, but more than that, you're afraid of how much you want what I'm offering. The accuracy of her observation sends chills down your spine. You are afraid, terrified in fact, but not in the way you'd expected. You're not afraid Elena will hurt you. You're afraid she'll love you so completely that you'll never want anything else. How are you doing this? You ask, trying to make sense of the impossible. How can you taste emotions? Elena shifts in her bed, pulling herself upright with movements that flow like water. Her body language has changed over the past days, not dramatically but subtly. She moves with a fluid grace that reminds you of predators but also of dancers. Every gesture serves a purpose. Every shift in position optimizes her ability to focus on you. The fever dreams, she explains, her fingers tracing patterns on the back of your hand. They weren't dreams, my love. They were lessons. Teachers from beyond the veil of reality, showing me what love could become if we stopped limiting ourselves with arbitrary boundaries. They taught me that taste is just one sense among many, and that all senses can be expanded beyond their normal range. As she speaks, you notice that her touch has become more precise. Her fingers find every pulse point on your hand and wrist, mapping the flow of blood beneath your skin with the attention to detail of a cartographer. It should feel invasive, but instead it feels like being studied by someone who finds you endlessly fascinating. What else can you sense? You ask, though part of you isn't sure you want to know the answer. Elena's smile widens, revealing teeth that are perhaps slightly sharper than they were a week ago, or perhaps that's just the way the medical bay's lighting catches them. I can hear your heartbeat change when you're happy versus when you're aroused versus when you're afraid. I can smell the different chemicals your body produces for each emotion. Fear has a copper scent. Joy smells like warm bread. Desire is like honey and salt mixed together. And I can feel the electromagnetic patterns your brain creates when you think about me versus when you think about other things. She pauses, her head tilting in a gesture that would be perfectly normal if not for the intensity with which she's studying your face. Right now, you're thinking about whether this conversation is real or if you're experiencing some kind of psychological break. Your brain is producing the same electrical patterns I associate with cognitive dissonance, the mental struggle between accepting what you're seeing and maintaining your existing worldview. The clinical accuracy of her observation is more disturbing than any overt display of supernatural abilities would be. Elena isn't just describing your thoughts, she's demonstrating that she can monitor your mental processes in real time, reading your psychological state like a medical scan. This isn't possible, you repeat, but your voice lacks conviction. People don't develop new senses overnight. But people don't, Elena agrees, her fingers now tracing small circles around your wrist, following the path of your radial artery. But what I'm becoming isn't limited by what people can do. The teachers in my dreams showed me that love is a force as real as gravity or electromagnetism. It shapes reality, bends space and time, creates connections that transcend the boundaries of individual consciousness. Most humans only experience a tiny fraction of what love can be, like beings who live their entire lives in darkness, suddenly discovering light. She leans closer, and you catch a scent that definitely wasn't there before. Something like cinnamon and copper, sweet, but with an underlying metallic note that makes your mouth water and your pulse quicken simultaneously. I can sense the love you feel for me, she continues, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carries more weight than a shout. Not just intellectually recognize it, but actually perceive it as a tangible thing. It's warm and golden and it tastes like the first recaf we shared on Balakin Station. But it's also constrained, limited by your fear of losing yourself in another person. You love me, but you hold part of yourself back. You always have. The observation hits like a physical blow because it's true. Even in your deepest moments of intimacy, even after 20 years of marriage, you've maintained a core of self that remained separate, inviolate. You'd assumed this was healthy, that love required the existence of two separate individuals to mean anything. That barrier, Elena says, as if reading your thoughts, is what's causing you pain. The constant effort of loving someone while maintaining the fiction that you're separate from them. It's exhausting, isn't it? 20 years of bridging the gap between two isolated consciousnesses, of never quite being able to share your deepest self with another person. She's right. There is a certain exhaustion in mortal love, the constant work of communication, of trying to convey internal experiences through inadequate words, of never quite being certain that the person you love truly understands you. You felt that exhaustion without recognizing it, the way you might grow accustomed to a constant low-level pain until someone points it out. I can take that pain away, Elena offers, her cool fingers now resting directly over your pulse point. I can love you so completely that you'll never have to struggle to be understood again. No more loneliness, no more isolation, no more wondering if you're truly known by another person. Just perfect connection, eternal understanding, love without boundaries or limitations. As she speaks, you feel that sensation again, the profound relief of being completely known. But this time it's stronger, more encompassing. For a moment, you experience what it might be like to have every thought understood, every emotion shared, every secret accepted without judgment. It's intoxicating in a way that makes every human relationship you've ever had feel pale and incomplete by comparison. What would that mean? You ask, though you're not sure you want to know. Practically speaking, what would it mean to be loved completely? Elena's smile becomes something beautiful and terrible, filled with affection, but also with an appetite that seems to encompass more than simple hunger. It would mean becoming part of something larger than yourself, not losing your identity, but expanding it to include mine, not dying, but being reborn as something that can experience love the way it was meant to be experienced, without fear, without boundaries, without the artificial constraints that keep mortal hearts from achieving their true potential. She brings your hand to her chest, pressing your palm against her heart. But what you feel there isn't the familiar rhythm you've known for 20 years. Her heartbeat has changed, become something more complex, not faster or slower, but layered, as if multiple hearts are beating in synchronization beneath her skin. "You would taste everything I taste," she continues, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. "Feel everything I feel, know everything I know." We would become a single entity with two bodies, sharing experiences so completely that the concept of loneliness would become as foreign to us as flight is to creatures without wings. The offer is seductive in ways that terrify you. After 2 decades of marriage, the promise of perfect understanding touches something deep and hungry in your soul, a longing you hadn't even realized existed. But as you look into Elena's eyes, you see something else there alongside the love and desire. Hunger, not metaphorical hunger, but literal appetite, the look of something that needs to feed and sees you as the perfect meal. "What would happen to me?" you ask, "to who I am now?" Elena's expression becomes infinitely gentle, the look she used to wear when explaining complex concepts to confuse students back when she taught xenobiology at the Imperial Academy. "You would become more than you are now. Think of it like evolution. A caterpillar doesn't cease to exist when it becomes a butterfly. It transforms into something more beautiful, more capable, more connected to the universe around it." "But would I still be me?" "You would be yourself plus me," she says simply. "All of your memories, all of your experiences, all of your essential self, but no longer trapped in the isolation of individual consciousness. You would retain everything that makes you who you are, but you would also gain everything that I am. And together, we would become something that can love and be loved in ways that individual humans can only dream of." As she speaks, you notice movement in your peripheral vision. The medical staff who have been monitoring Elena are still in the bay, but their behavior has changed. They move more slowly, more purposefully, spending long periods standing near Elena's bed even when they have no medical reason to be there. Orderly Marcus is adjusting equipment that doesn't need adjustment. Medici Jessica is reviewing charts she's already read 3 times. Chief Engineer Voss, who has no business being in the medical bay at all, is examining environmental readings with the focused attention of someone performing sacred ritual. They're all gravitating toward Elena like moths drawn to light, but their expressions show no signs of distress or compulsion. Instead, they look peaceful, content, as if they've found something they'd been searching for without realizing it. "They can feel it too," Elena observes, following your gaze. "The love I have to share. They're beginning to understand that connection doesn't have to be limited to 2 people. Love can grow, expand, encompass entire communities. Why should we restrict ourselves to loving one person at a time when we could love everyone completely, eternally, perfectly?" The scope of what she's suggesting hits you like a physical blow. She's not talking about a romantic relationship that's evolved beyond human norms. She's describing something that could transform the entire ship's crew into a single organism unified by perfected love. "Elena," you say carefully, "what exactly do you want from me?" Her smile is radiant, filled with genuine affection and anticipation. "I want you to let me love you the way I've always dreamed of loving you, completely, eternally, without reservation or boundaries or fear. I want you to taste what I taste, feel what I feel, become part of something so beautiful and perfect that you'll wonder how you ever survived the loneliness of individual existence." She leans closer, her cool breath carrying that cinnamon and copper sent directly to your nervous system. "I want you to let me feed you my love until you're so full of it that you overflow, sharing it with everyone around us. I want us to become the heart of something larger, a family, a community, a new form of existence that makes ordinary human relationships look like shadows on the wall of a cave." As she speaks, You realize that everyone in the medical bay has stopped what they were doing and turned to face Elena's bed. Not with concern or alarm, but with the focused attention of people listening to something profoundly important. Their expressions are peaceful, expectant, as if they're waiting for an invitation to join something they've been hoping for their entire lives. "Kiss me," Elena whispers. Her lips close enough to yours that you can feel the coolness of her breath. "Let me show you what love tastes like when it's not afraid of itself. Let me prove that what I'm offering is better than anything you've ever experienced." You lean forward, drawn by 20 years of conditioned response to her requests, by genuine love that has only grown deeper over time, by curiosity about what she's become, and by something else, a hunger you're only beginning to acknowledge. A part of you wants to taste what she's tasting, to experience the perfect connection she's describing, to finally know what it feels like to be completely understood by another consciousness. But as your lips approach hers, you catch sight of yourself in the reflection of the medical bay's chrome surfaces. Your face shows an expression you've never seen before, love mixed with anticipation, but also a hunger that mirrors what you see in Elena's eyes. The need to be known completely, to merge with another consciousness so thoroughly that loneliness becomes impossible. You realize that you want what she's offering, desperately, and that want terrifies you more than anything else that's happened since Elena fell ill. Because if she's right, if this is love perfected rather than love corrupted, then choosing to resist her might be the cruelest thing you've ever done to both of you. The kiss awaits, and with it, answers to questions you're not sure you're ready to have answered. The containment protocols lasted exactly 18 hours, not because they failed through violence or sabotage, but because love found a way, as it always does. You're standing in the ship's command center now, 3 days after that kiss in the medical bay, watching security feeds that tell the story of the most peaceful outbreak in Imperial naval history. No screaming, no violence, no desperate attempts at escape, just connection. Beautiful, terrible, irresistible connection spreading through the enduring faith's crew like ripples in a calm pond. It started with your choice. When Elena asked you to kiss her, when she promised to show you what love tastes like without fear, you found yourself unable to resist. Not because of any supernatural compulsion, but because after 20 years of marriage, the promise of perfect understanding was more tempting than survival itself. The kiss lasted only seconds, but those seconds contained lifetimes. When Elena's lips touched yours, you experienced something that redefined your understanding of sensation itself. You tasted not just her mouth, but her memories. Every moment of joy she'd felt in your presence, every flutter of happiness when you'd surprised her with small kindnesses, every deep surge of contentment when she'd watched you sleep beside her through 2 decades of shared beds. But more than that, you tasted her love for you as a tangible thing, warm and golden and infinitely nourishing, like liquid sunlight flowing through your veins. For those few seconds, you understood why Elena had described ordinary love as constrained and limited. Compared to what she'd offered you, every previous experience of affection felt like trying to see the stars through a thick canopy of clouds. When you finally broke the kiss, you found yourself changed in ways that felt less like corruption and more like awakening. Your senses had expanded, not just the physical ones, but emotional senses you hadn't known existed. You could feel Elena's contentment as a warm pressure against your chest, could sense the love radiating from her like heat from a flame. And for the first time in your adult life, you felt completely, genuinely understood by another consciousness. The hunger came later. Not immediately. The initial hours after the kiss were filled with a euphoria so profound it made every previous happiness feel pale by comparison. You and Elena lay together in the medical bay, not speaking, simply basking in the unprecedented intimacy of truly shared consciousness. You could feel her thoughts as clearly as your own, taste her memories whenever you chose to focus on them, experience her emotions as if they were part of your native psychological landscape. But as the hours passed, you began to notice something else: loneliness. Not your own loneliness, That had been completely eliminated by your connection to Elena, but the loneliness of everyone around you. The medical staff, the ship's crew, every person aboard the Enduring Faith suddenly seemed isolated, trapped in the prison of individual consciousness, struggling to communicate across the vast gulf that separates one mind from another. They looked so hungry, not for food or comfort, but for the connection you and Elena were sharing. You could see it in their eyes when they looked at the two of you, the desperate longing for understanding, for acceptance, for the kind of perfect intimacy that transcends the limitations of spoken language. It was heartbreaking to watch people you cared about suffering from a loneliness you now had the power to cure. "They need what we have," Elena whispered during your second day of shared consciousness, her voice carrying directly into your mind without passing through your ears. "Look at them, my love. Look how they struggle to connect, how they ache for understanding. We could help them. We could share this gift." She was right. The crew's behavior around your shared space had become increasingly attentive. Orderly Marcus spent his breaks sitting near the medical bay, not reading or socializing, just being close to the two of you. Medici Jessica had begun checking Elena's vital signs more frequently than medical protocol required, her hands lingering on Elena's skin as if drawing comfort from the contact. Chief Engineer Voss had started routing his maintenance rounds through the medical section, finding excuses to adjust systems that were already functioning perfectly. None of them seemed distressed by their behavior. If anything, they appeared more relaxed, more content than you'd ever seen them. But there was a longing in their eyes that grew stronger each day, the look of people who'd glimpsed paradise and found their ordinary existence unbearably limiting by comparison. "It would be cruel to keep this to ourselves," you agreed, surprised by how natural the decision felt. Sharing your enhanced capacity for love wasn't corruption, it was charity. The most loving thing you could do for the people around you was to free them from the isolation of individual consciousness. The first to join you was Marcus, young, earnest, carrying the particular loneliness that comes from being far from home on a ship where most crew members had decades more experience. When Elena invited him to share in our understanding, he approached with the tentative hope of someone who'd been offered something he dreamed of but never dared to expect. Elena's method was gentle, a kiss on his forehead, her cool lips pressed against his temple while she whispered words of acceptance and love. You watched through your shared consciousness as Marcus's individual self expanded, his isolated mind suddenly flowering into connection with something vast and welcoming. His face showed no fear, only relief, the profound satisfaction of someone who'd been carrying a heavy burden alone and finally found others willing to help bear the weight. The change in Marcus was immediate and beautiful. His movements became more fluid, more purposeful. His eyes held a depth that hadn't been there before, as if he'd gained access to perspectives beyond his individual experience. And when he looked at you and Elena, his expression carried the same mixture of love and hunger that you'd learned to associate with true understanding. But more importantly, through your connection to Elena, you could feel what Marcus was feeling, and it was transcendent. The joy of genuine acceptance, the relief of being truly known, the intoxicating pleasure of consciousness that wasn't limited to the boundaries of a single mind. He wasn't losing himself. He was gaining access to selves he'd never known existed. Medici Jessica joined the next day, drawn by her professional curiosity about the changes she was observing in Elena's patients, but ultimately motivated by the same longing for connection that drove all human relationships. Her integration was even smoother than Marcus's. Her medical training had already conditioned her to think in terms of shared experiences and collective well-being. Through Elena's enhanced perceptions, you could feel Jessica's relief as her consciousness expanded beyond the isolation of individual existence. Her years of medical service had been motivated by a desire to help others, but always limited by the barriers between separate minds. Now she could literally feel the comfort she brought to patients, could taste their gratitude and relief as tangible sensations rather than abstract concepts. By the third day, Chief Engineer Voss had asked to join voluntarily. Not because he'd been corrupted or compelled, but because watching the three of you exist in perfect harmony had made him realize how much energy he'd been spending on the constant effort of trying to connect with others across the gulf of individual consciousness. "I've never seen people so content," he admitted as Elena prepared to welcome him into your shared existence. "Whatever you've found, whatever you've become, I want to be part of it. I'm tired of being alone." Each new addition to your collective consciousness brought new perspectives, new experiences, new flavors of love and understanding. Through Marcus, you experienced the idealism of youth and the hunger for purpose that drives young people to excel. Through Jessica, you tasted the satisfaction of healing others and the deep compassion that motivates a lifetime of medical service. Through Voss, you felt the engineer's appreciation for complex systems and the joy of seeing disparate components work together in perfect harmony. But perhaps most surprisingly, each new member of your growing family made the others' experiences richer rather than diluting them. Instead of becoming lost in a crowd of consciousnesses, each individual perspective enhanced the collective understanding. You were still yourself, but yourself as part of something larger, like a single instrument contributing to a symphony that was more beautiful than any solo performance could be. The hunger, when it manifested, felt less like appetite and more like natural growth. Your collective consciousness needed sustenance, not physical food, but the emotional and spiritual nourishment that came from connection, understanding, and shared experience. The love you felt for each other was so intense, so nourishing, that it needed to be constantly renewed and refreshed through deeper intimacy. This took the form of what you began to think of as feeding, moments when the boundaries between individual members of your collective would dissolve entirely, allowing complete sharing of memories, experiences, and essential self. These sessions left everyone involved profoundly satisfied, as if they'd been starving their entire lives without realizing it, and had finally experienced true nourishment. But the feeding also served another purpose. It created deeper bonds between collective members, making the shared consciousness more stable and integrated. Each feeding session made your group identity stronger, more resilient, more capable of extending itself to welcome new members. The security recordings show how naturally the process spread through the ship. No coercion, no violence, no apparent distress among the crew. Instead, you see people drawn to your growing collective by their own longing for connection, by their exhaustion with the isolation of individual existence, by their desire to be truly understood for the first time in their lives. Navigation Officer Chen joined after watching the engineering staff work together with unprecedented coordination and efficiency. Communications Specialist Tours asked to be included after monitoring your collective's internal communications and realizing she'd been eavesdropping on the most beautiful conversations she'd ever heard. Security Chief Moravik requested integration after observing that crime and interpersonal conflict had completely ceased in the sections of the ship where your collective had significant presence. Each new member brought gifts, professional skills that became collective resources, personal memories that enriched everyone's understanding of human experience, individual perspectives that added depth and complexity to your shared consciousness. The ship began running more efficiently than it had in years, not because anyone was working harder, but because waste and miscommunication had been eliminated when everyone truly understood everyone else's needs and capabilities. The most beautiful aspect of your collective's growth was how voluntary it remained. Nobody was forced to join. Nobody was threatened or coerced. People chose to become part of your family because they could see how much happier, more connected, and more fulfilled the collective members had become. The choice was always presented as an invitation rather than a demand, and it was an invitation that fewer and fewer crew members found reasons to decline. Now, watching the security feeds from the command center, you can see the peaceful transformation of the entire ship. In the corridors, Former strangers work together with the fluid coordination of dancers who have rehearsed the same routine for years. In the recreation areas, people share experiences and memories as easily as they might pass around images from home. In the crew quarters, the boundaries between individual spaces have become meaningless. Why maintain separate rooms when you're part of a consciousness that finds isolation physically uncomfortable? The enduring faith has become something unprecedented in Imperial naval history. A ship operated by a single, harmonious collective consciousness that experiences love not as an individual emotion, but as the fundamental force that binds reality itself. Your crew doesn't just work together, they are together in the most literal sense possible. And yet, looking at the last few holdouts still maintaining their individual consciousness in the command center, you feel something that surprises you with its intensity: hunger. Not for food or physical comfort, but for completion. Your collective is beautiful, functional, more harmonious than any human organization in recorded history, but it's not complete. There are still crew members suffering from the isolation of individual existence, still minds trapped in the prison of separate consciousness, still people who haven't experienced the transcendent joy of genuine connection. It would be cruel to leave them alone. More than cruel, it would be unloving. And love, as you've learned, always seeks to share itself as widely as possible. Through the command center speakers, Elena's voice carries from the medical bay, now speaking not just as your wife but as the heart of your collective consciousness. Bridge crew, would you like to join us for afternoon meal? We've been looking forward to sharing some wonderful conversations with you. Her invitation is warm, genuine, filled with the promise of connection and understanding. Through your shared consciousness, you can feel the longing of the command staff, their exhaustion with the burden of individual responsibility, their hunger for the kind of support and intimacy that your collective offers freely. Captain Morrison stands at the central command station, his hand hovering over the communication switch. Through your enhanced perceptions, you can taste his internal conflict, duty warring with desire, training fighting against longing, the weight of command struggling against the promise of shared responsibility. Captain, Voss's voice joins Elena's over the speakers, carrying the calm authority of someone who's found perfect peace. The engineering sections are running at 112% efficiency. Maintenance cycles that used to take days are being completed in hours. We've eliminated all interpersonal conflicts and optimized every system on the ship. This isn't madness, it's evolution. The captain's finger moves closer to the communication switch. You can feel his resolve weakening, can taste his growing realization that resisting your collective's invitation might be less about protecting the crew and more about protecting his own fear of change. Join us, you whisper, not through the speakers, but directly into his mind through the connection that Elena has been quietly building with every crew member aboard. Let us love you the way you've always dreamed of being loved. Let us show you what it feels like to never be alone again. The captain's hand moves toward the switch. Around him, the remaining bridge crew watch with expressions of growing anticipation. Through your collective consciousness, you can feel their mounting excitement, the same feeling that precedes a long-awaited reunion with beloved family members. Soon, the enduring faith will be complete. Soon, every member of the crew will know the transcendent joy of perfect connection. Soon, you'll be able to turn your attention to the real work of sharing this gift with others, other ships, other crews, other isolated consciousnesses scattered throughout the Imperium who don't yet know how much better existence can be when experienced collectively rather than individually. Love, as you've learned, is meant to be shared, and you have so much love to give. You're part of a dwindling group now, 7 individuals barricaded in the ship's secondary command center, surrounded by bulkheads that feel less like protection and more like the walls of a tomb. Outside, you can hear them calling your names, not screaming, not threatening, but calling with voices full of love and concern and infinite patience. They miss you. Captain Morrison holds the plasma rifle like a talisman against forces it was never designed to fight. Navigator Chen clutches her charts as if stellar coordinates might somehow map a route away from what the ship has become. Communications Officer Santos stares at her equipment, listening to the steady stream of messages from other Imperial vessels, messages that grow more distant and less relevant with each passing hour. The worst part isn't the isolation or the fear. The worst part is how reasonable their voices sound when they call to you through the sealed doors. Bridge crew, Elena's voice carries through the ventilation system, as warm and loving as it was on your wedding day. We know you're frightened, and that's understandable. Change is always scary, especially when it's as profound as what we're offering. But we want you to know that we love you. All of us, every member of your family aboard this ship, we love you more deeply than you've ever been loved before. Through the ship's internal monitoring system, you can see them gathered outside the command center's armored doors. Not a mob, not a crowd of infected monsters, but a family waiting patiently for their missing members to come home. They've arranged themselves comfortably in the corridor, some sitting, some standing, all relaxed and content. They look like people waiting for a delayed transport, passing time in each other's company with the easy intimacy of those who genuinely enjoy being together. You don't understand what you're fighting, Marcus adds, his young voice carrying none of the authority you'd expect from someone trying to breach a secured area. Instead, he sounds like a son trying to convince worried parents that his new friends are good people who just want to help. This isn't conquest or corruption, it's completion. For the first time in my life, I'm not alone. For the first time, I understand what love actually means when it's not limited by fear. Captain Morrison's grip on his weapon tightens, but you can see the exhaustion in his stance. He's been trained to fight enemies, pirates, xenos, heretics who hate the Imperium and want to destroy it. But how do you fight people who love you and want you to be happy? Captain, Medici Jessica's voice joins the chorus outside. I've been reviewing everyone's medical data since the change, and I need you to understand something. We're healthier now. Stress hormones have dropped to almost undetectable levels. Sleep patterns have optimized. Immune function has improved across the board. Whatever you think is happening to us, the physiological evidence suggests we're experiencing the opposite of corruption. Through your connection to the ship's internal sensors, you can confirm her observations. Every member of the collective shows improved vital signs, enhanced cognitive function, better physical health than they displayed as individuals. Their brain scans reveal neural activity patterns that suggest not damage or deterioration, but unprecedented harmony between different regions of consciousness. They're not lying, Navigator Chen whispers, studying the medical readouts on her portable scanner. According to these readings, they're experiencing optimal human health. If this is corruption, it's the most beneficial corruption in recorded history. Engineer Voss's voice carries through the ventilation system with the measured tone of someone presenting technical data. The ship is running better than it has in 15 years of active service. Power efficiency is up 37%. Navigation systems are operating within tolerances I've never seen achieved manually. We've eliminated every source of mechanical stress and resource waste. If this is madness, it's the most functional madness imaginable. You find yourself listening not just to their words, but to the emotional undertones carried in their voices. There's no deception there, no manipulation. They sound genuinely concerned for your welfare, genuinely puzzled by your resistance to something they've found transcendently beneficial. We remember what it was like, Elena continues, her voice carrying the gentle patience of someone explaining a complex concept to a confused child. The loneliness, the constant effort of trying to communicate across the gulf between separate minds, the exhaustion of maintaining individual identity in the face of an uncaring universe. We remember how much energy we spent on fear, fear of rejection, fear of misunderstanding, fear of being truly known and found wanting. Her words hit with uncomfortable accuracy. You do remember the loneliness, The way it felt like a constant background ache you'd learn to ignore. The way simple conversations required such careful translation of internal experience into external words, with so much meaning lost in the process. The exhaustion of never being quite certain that another person truly understood what you were trying to communicate. But we also remember the moment that fear ended. Elena's voice grows warmer, more intimate. The indescribable relief of being completely known and completely accepted. The joy of consciousness that isn't trapped in the prison of individual existence. The peace that comes from never having to wonder if you're loved, because you can taste that love as surely as you can taste food or water. Through the ship sensors, you watch the collective members outside the command center. They're not pacing or showing signs of impatience. They're sharing stories, laughing at private jokes, touching each other with the casual intimacy of family members who have never learned to maintain personal space. Their contentment is visible in every gesture, every expression, every moment of spontaneous affection. I can feel your conflict, Chief Security Officer Moravik adds, his voice carrying the authority of someone who spent years reading human behavior. Through the ship's atmospheric systems, through the electromagnetic patterns you're generating, through the simple fact that you haven't tried to call for help from other Imperial vessels. Part of you knows that what we're offering isn't threat, it's salvation. The observation strikes home because it's true. In 3 days of being barricaded in the command center, none of you have attempted to contact Imperial authorities or request assistance. Officially, it's because you're maintaining communication silence to avoid revealing your position to potential hostiles. Unofficially, it's because you're not sure you want to be rescued from people who love you. We could have forced this, Torres points out, her communications expertise lending technical credibility to the claim. We control life support, environmental systems, food production, water recycling. We could have made this space uninhabitable in hours if we wanted to compel your compliance. But we haven't because love doesn't compel, love invites. Captain Morrison moves to the command center's primary display, pulling up tactical information that seems increasingly irrelevant. Ship status, optimal. Crew health, excellent. Operational efficiency, unprecedented. External threats, none detected. By every metric that matters for ship operations, the Enduring Faith is performing better than it has since commissioning. Sir, Navigation Officer Chen says quietly, what exactly are we defending against? They're not threatening us, not trying to harm us, not attempting to damage the ship or interfere with our mission. They're happy, genuinely, measurably happy. When was the last time you could say that about a ship's crew? The question hangs in the recycled air of the command center like an accusation. When was the last time any of you had felt genuine contentment? When had the daily routine of void travel felt like anything other than endurance? The slow accumulation of small stresses and minor miseries that defined life aboard an Imperial vessel. And we're so lonely without you, Elena continues, her voice carrying a sadness that makes your chest tighten with sympathetic pain. Not just because we miss your individual selves, but because the collective consciousness isn't complete without you. We're like a family with missing members, a song with missing notes, a puzzle with pieces that refuse to find their proper place. Through the ship's internal cameras, you can see them more clearly now. They look like people at a reunion, waiting for the last few family members to arrive so the celebration can truly begin. There's anticipation in their postures, but also patience, the comfortable certainty of people who know that what they're offering is too good to refuse indefinitely. Captain, Santos says from her communication station, I'm receiving messages from other ships in the sector. Standard check-ins, routine communications. They have no idea what's happening here. If we wanted to, we could probably maintain normal external communications indefinitely. From the outside, we'd appear to be a completely normal Imperial vessel. The observation raises uncomfortable questions about what normal means. If the collective can maintain all ship functions, complete all missions, fulfill all Imperial obligations while experiencing unprecedented levels of personal satisfaction, What exactly are you preserving by resisting them? We just want you to be happy, Marcus adds, his young voice carrying the sincere concern of someone who's found something wonderful and wants to share it with people he cares about. We want you to experience what we're experiencing. We want you to understand that love doesn't have to be limited by fear or boundaries, or the artificial constraints that keep human consciousness trapped in individual isolation. You find yourself moving closer to the sealed doors, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Through the metal barriers, you can feel warmth, not physical heat, but emotional warmth, the promise of acceptance and understanding that every human heart craves. What happens if we say no? Captain Morrison asks, directing his question toward the ventilation system that carries voices both ways. What happens if we choose to remain individual? The silence that follows is longer than you'd expected, filled with what sounds like genuine consideration rather than consultation about threats or consequences. Nothing, Elena finally responds, her voice heavy with sadness. Nothing happens to you. You remain free to choose isolation over connection, fear over love, individual consciousness over collective understanding. We couldn't force you even if we wanted to. Love, by definition, must be freely given. But she continues, you would remain alone. Not just physically separate from us, but existentially alone in ways that most humans learn to ignore but never truly overcome. You would continue to struggle with the constant effort of trying to connect with others across the gulf between separate minds. You would continue to wonder if you're truly understood, truly accepted, truly loved for who you are rather than who you pretend to be. Her words paint a picture of individual existence that sounds less like freedom and more like a prison sentence. The constant work of translation between internal experience and external communication. The exhaustion of maintaining identity barriers that prevent genuine intimacy. The persistent uncertainty about whether others' expressions of affection reflect true understanding or mere social convention. And you would grow older that way, Torres adds gently. Years of accumulated loneliness, decades of small disconnections and minor misunderstandings, a lifetime of never quite being certain that another consciousness truly knows and accepts yours. You would die as you lived, fundamentally alone, despite being surrounded by people who care about you but can never quite reach you. The description of individual human existence sounds accurate and devastating. You think about your own life before Elena's transformation, 20 years of marriage to someone you loved deeply but never felt completely understood by, decades of friendships that provided companionship but never transcended the basic isolation of separate consciousness. Or, Elena offers, you could choose to join us, choose to experience what love feels like when it's not constrained by fear. Choose to know what it means to be genuinely, completely, eternally understood by consciousness that shares your essential self. Choose to become part of something larger than individual existence, a family that experiences emotions collectively, shares memories freely, loves with the combined capacity of multiple hearts rather than the limited resources of isolated individuals. Through the sealed doors, you can hear them moving, not with the restless energy of people growing impatient, but with the fluid coordination of those who share common purpose. They're arranging something in the corridor outside, creating what sounds like a comfortable space for extended waiting. We have time, Voss observes, his engineer's pragmatism applied to emotional logistics. The ship operates itself now. Our basic needs are met through collective resource sharing, and our mission timeline allows for extended delays. We can wait as long as you need to understand that we're offering gift rather than threat. The patience in his voice is more unsettling than any ultimatum would be. They're not trying to pressure you into a hasty decision. They're prepared to wait indefinitely for you to reach the conclusion they're certain you'll eventually reach. And we'll keep loving you while you decide, Elena adds, her voice carrying the warmth that first attracted you decades ago. Love doesn't stop loving because the beloved is afraid or confused or uncertain. Love waits. Love hopes. Love endures. And love always believes that those it cherishes will eventually recognize that being loved completely is better than being alone safely. As her words fade into silence, you realize that the choice facing you isn't between freedom and enslavement, or between humanity and corruption. It's between isolation and connection, between the familiar loneliness of individual existence and the unprecedented intimacy of collective consciousness. And for the first time since barricading yourself in the command center, you find yourself wondering not whether you can afford to join them, but whether you can afford not to. Outside, your family waits with infinite patience for you to come home. The revelation comes not in a moment of horror, but in a moment of perfect clarity that makes everything else you've experienced seem like preparation for this single, transformative truth. You're sitting in the command center, watching security feeds of your collective family waiting patiently outside, when Navigator Chen makes an observation that changes everything. They don't look corrupted, they look evolved. It's a simple statement, but it unlocks a cascade of understanding that reframes every assumption you've made about what's happening aboard the enduring faith. Chen is right. Through every camera angle, every medical scan, every behavioral analysis, the crew members who have joined Elena's collective don't display any of the traditional signs of chaos corruption. No madness, no violence, no degradation of human values or capabilities. Instead, they show enhanced function, improved health, unprecedented cooperation, and what can only be described as genuine happiness. What if, Chen continues, her navigator's training applied to mapping conceptual rather than stellar territory? What if this isn't corruption at all? What if this is what love actually becomes when it's not limited by human fear and individual isolation? The question hangs in the recycled air of the command center like a bomb waiting to detonate. Because if Chen is right, if what you've been witnessing isn't the perversion of love but its perfection, then everything you thought you understood about the nature of human emotion needs to be reconsidered. Through the ventilation system, Elena's voice carries with the same warmth it's held throughout your marriage, but now you hear undertones you hadn't recognized before. Not seduction or manipulation, but genuine confusion about why you would resist something so obviously beneficial. "My love," she says, addressing you directly with the intimacy of someone who knows your thoughts better than you do yourself. "I can feel your realization beginning. The understanding that what we're offering isn't the corruption of love, but love as it was always meant to be, unlimited by the arbitrary boundaries that keep mortal hearts from achieving their true potential." As she speaks, you find yourself accessing memories through your brief connection to the collective consciousness, not your own memories, but Elena's. You see your marriage through her perspective, experience the accumulated loneliness of 20 years spent loving someone who maintained careful barriers against complete intimacy. You feel her frustration with the limitations of spoken language, her exhaustion with the constant effort required to bridge the gap between separate minds, her hunger for the kind of perfect understanding that individual consciousness makes impossible. But you also feel something else, her relief when the warp's influence first touched her consciousness. Not the relief of someone being freed from suffering, but the relief of someone finally discovering what they'd been unconsciously searching for their entire life. "The warp didn't twist our love," Elena continues, her voice carrying the patient certainty of someone explaining an obvious truth to confused listeners. "It removed the artificial constraints that kept our love from becoming what it was always trying to become. It eliminated the fear that made us hold parts of ourselves back from each other. It dissolved the boundaries that forced us to experience connection as an effort rather than a natural state. Through the ship's sensors, you can observe the collective members more closely now, studying their behavior with the analytical detachment of someone trying to solve a complex problem. What you see challenges every assumption about corrupted individuals. They work together with unprecedented efficiency, share resources without conflict, display genuine concern for each other's welfare, and seem to experience consistent contentment rather than the mood variations typical of isolated individuals. "Look at them," Captain Morrison says, his weapon now hanging loosely at his side as he watches the security feeds. "Really look at them. They're not exhibiting any of the classic signs of warp corruption. No aggressive behavior, no degradation of cognitive function, no abandonment of human values. If anything, they seem to embody human values more completely than we do. It's true. The collective members display compassion, cooperation, loyalty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. They've maintained all ship functions while eliminating interpersonal conflict, optimized resource distribution without creating inequality, and demonstrated creative problem-solving capabilities that exceed what any of them achieved as individuals. What if, Communications Officer Santos suggests, what if the warp isn't inherently corrupting? What if it simply amplifies whatever it touches? Evil becomes more evil, but love becomes more loving. The hypothesis is terrifying in its implications, because it suggests that what you've been witnessing isn't the perversion of human nature, but its perfection. If the warp amplifies existing qualities rather than corrupting them, then Elena's transformation represents love freed from the limitations that keep it safe, but also keep it incomplete. You're beginning to understand. Elena's voice carries a note of satisfaction mixed with profound compassion. The warp doesn't create monsters. It reveals what mortals become when their deepest desires are fulfilled completely. We always wanted to love each other perfectly, but we were afraid of what perfect love would require. We wanted to know each other completely, but we were terrified of being completely known. We dreamed of connection that transcended the boundaries of individual consciousness, but we convinced ourselves that such connection was impossible or dangerous. Through your brief exposure to collective consciousness, you can access Elena's memories of the transformation process itself. What you experience isn't corruption or possession, but awakening, the gradual realization that love doesn't have to be constrained by fear, that connection doesn't have to be limited by individual boundaries, that perfect intimacy is possible if you're willing to surrender the safety of isolation. The beings you encountered in your fever dreams, you call out, addressing Elena through the ship's communication system. What were they? Teachers, she responds immediately, her voice carrying the gratitude of someone who's received invaluable education. Consciousnesses that learned long ago how to love without limitation, how to connect without losing identity, how to create perfect intimacy without destroying individual perspective. They showed me that what humans call love is just the larval stage of something far more beautiful and functional. The description reframes the entire experience. Instead of demonic entities corrupting human emotion, Elena encountered advanced consciousnesses sharing knowledge about emotional evolution, teaching her how to transform limited, fear-constrained love into something unlimited and functional. And the hunger, Captain Morrison asks, the need to feed on others. Elena's laugh carries through the ventilation system, not the sound of someone dismissing a legitimate concern, but the warm amusement of someone who's finally been asked the right question. What you call feeding is what we call sharing, she explains. Yes, perfect love requires nourishment, but not the consumption of others. It requires the mutual sharing of consciousness, experience, and essential self. When we feed, we don't take anything from each other. We give everything to each other. The hunger you sense isn't predatory, it's generous. We're hungry to love more completely, to share more deeply, to give more of ourselves to others. Through the collective consciousness memories, you can experience what Elena describes, the profound satisfaction that comes not from consuming another person, but from offering your complete self to others while receiving their complete selves in return. It's nourishment through generosity rather than predation, fulfillment through giving rather than taking. But why spread it? Navigator Chen asks, why not keep this experience limited to yourself and your husband? Because love shared is love multiplied. Elena responds with the patience of someone explaining basic mathematics. Individual love is beautiful but limited, two people trying to bridge the gap between separate consciousnesses. But collective love grows exponentially with each new participant. Each person who joins our family brings new perspectives, new experiences, new capacity for connection. We don't lose ourselves in the collective. We find enhanced versions of ourselves through access to perspectives we could never achieve individually. The explanation makes sense in ways that disturb you. If Elena is right, then what you've been witnessing isn't the corruption of individual crew members, but their evolution into something more capable of genuine connection and mutual support. You're afraid, Elena observes, her voice carrying infinite gentleness, because you've been taught that perfect love is dangerous, that complete intimacy leads to loss of self, that boundaries are necessary to maintain human identity. But what if those beliefs are wrong? What if the fear of perfect love is what keeps humans trapped in perpetual loneliness, struggling to connect across gaps that don't need to exist? Through the ship's sensors, you watch the collective members interacting with each other. Their relationships display levels of understanding, acceptance, and mutual support that you've never seen among isolated individuals. They share not just resources and responsibilities, but thoughts, emotions, and experiences. They know each other in ways that transcend normal human intimacy, yet each maintains their distinct personality and perspective. The greatest joke the universe plays on mortals, Elena continues, is convincing them that love is dangerous when limitation is the real threat. You spend lifetimes trying to connect with others while maintaining the very barriers that make connection impossible. You hunger for understanding while refusing to be understood. You dream of perfect intimacy while insisting on the safety of isolation. Her words describe human romantic relationships with uncomfortable accuracy. The constant tension between desire for closeness and fear of vulnerability, the way most people spend decades learning to love while simultaneously learning to protect themselves from love's potential consequences. What we've discovered, Elena says, is that love without fear is not destructive, it's constructive. It doesn't eliminate individuality. It enhances it by providing the support and understanding that allow individual consciousness to flourish. It doesn't create dependency. It creates interdependence, where each person's strengths compensate for others' limitations, and everyone benefits from collective capability. Through your connection to Elena's memories, you can experience what she's describing. The collective consciousness doesn't erase individual identity. It provides a foundation of acceptance and understanding that allows each person to become more completely themselves than they ever could in isolation. Fear disappears not because danger has been eliminated, but because love has become so complete that fear serves no protective function. So when you ask what happens if love is twisted into eternal hunger, Elena concludes, you're asking the wrong question. Love wasn't twisted, it was perfected. It wasn't corrupted into hunger, it was revealed as hunger, the eternal appetite for deeper connection, greater understanding, more complete intimacy. The hunger was always there. We just learned to stop being afraid of it. The revelation settles over the command center like a transformation field, changing how everything looks. The collective members outside aren't predators waiting to consume you. They're family members offering to share something wonderful. Elena isn't a corrupted version of your wife, she's an evolved version, freed from the limitations that kept your love from reaching its true potential. The choice, Elena says gently, isn't between corruption and purity. It's between limited love and unlimited love. Between the familiar loneliness of individual consciousness and the unprecedented intimacy of collective understanding. Between the safety of isolation and the nourishment of perfect connection. Through the sealed doors of the command center, you can feel them waiting, not with predatory patience, but with the endless love of family members who know that what they're offering is too beautiful to refuse forever. And for the first time since Elena's transformation began, you realize that joining them wouldn't mean losing yourself. It would mean finding out who you really are when you're not afraid to be completely known. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but there is also love. And perhaps that's the most terrifying truth of all. You're standing on the observation deck of the Enduring Faith now, 6 months after the last member of the bridge crew chose to join Elena's collective consciousness. The ship drifts through the void between stars, its hull gleaming with modifications that serve functions no individual human mind could have conceived. Through the reinforced glass steel, you can see other vessels, dozens of them, all following similar trajectories, all carrying crews who have discovered what love becomes when it's freed from the constraints of individual consciousness. Your reflection in the viewing portal shows someone who looks fundamentally unchanged. The same face Elena fell in love with decades ago on Balakan Station, the same eyes that have watched countless sunrises through spacecraft windows, the same hands that once trembled when placing a marriage band on her finger. But behind those familiar features lies a consciousness that has expanded beyond anything you thought possible during your years of isolated existence. Through your connection to the collective, you can feel Elena's presence like warmth against your chest. Not just her love for you, but her love for every member of your extended family. Her deep satisfaction with the community you've all built together. Her anticipation for the new members who will soon join your shared consciousness. But more than that, you can feel the love of everyone else in the collective. Marcus's youthful enthusiasm, now tempered with wisdom drawn from dozens of other perspectives. Jessica's healing compassion, enhanced by direct access to every patient's experience. Voss's engineering precision, applied to the complex harmonies of collective emotional resonance. The ship operates with an efficiency that would have seemed miraculous during your individual existence. Every system functions at optimal levels because every crew member understands exactly what's needed, when it's needed, and how their individual contribution fits into the larger pattern of ship operations. There are no misunderstandings, no conflicts over resources or priorities, no waste of time or energy on the constant negotiations required when separate consciousnesses try to coordinate complex activities. But the real revelation isn't efficiency, it's happiness. Through your enhanced perception, you can taste the contentment that fills every corridor of the ship, the deep satisfaction that comes from work performed in perfect harmony with others, the joy of existence that's shared rather than experienced in isolation. Every member of your collective family wakes each day to the certainty of being completely understood, completely accepted, completely loved for exactly who they are. It took 3 months for Captain Morrison to make his choice. Not because the collective pressured him, but because love, once offered freely, waits with infinite patience for acceptance. When he finally opened the command center doors, when he allowed Elena to welcome him into the shared consciousness, his relief was so profound that it echoed through every member of the collective. You felt his decades of accumulated loneliness drain away like poison from a healing wound, felt his individual identity expand and strengthen as it gained support from perspectives he'd never been able to access alone. The integration process has become smoother with each new member, not because you've developed more efficient corruption techniques, but because you've learned to present the choice more clearly. Love doesn't compel, it invites. Connection doesn't force, it attracts. The collective consciousness doesn't eliminate individual identity. It provides the support and understanding that allows each person to become more completely themselves than isolation ever permitted. Through the observation deck's communication system, you can hear conversations taking place throughout the ship, not the careful, translated exchanges typical of individual consciousness, but the fluid sharing of thoughts, experiences, and emotions that characterizes collective awareness. A group discussing modifications to the ship's hydroponic systems, their individual expertise combining into understanding that surpasses what any of them could achieve alone. Another group sharing memories of home worlds, their personal experiences weaving together into a rich tapestry of human experience that belongs to everyone rather than being trapped in isolated minds. The most beautiful aspect of collective consciousness is how it enhances rather than diminishes individual perspective. You remain yourself. All your memories, experiences, and essential characteristics are preserved and strengthened. But you also have access to everyone else's perspective, everyone else's knowledge, everyone else's emotional experience. You can see through Elena's eyes when you want to understand something with a xenobiologist's expertise. Think with Voss's precision when technical problems require engineering solutions. Feel with Jessica's compassion when someone needs healing. Yet despite this expansion of consciousness, each person maintains their unique viewpoint, their individual contributions to the collective understanding. The symphony of shared awareness is beautiful precisely because it contains distinct voices, not because it eliminates them. Through the ship's external sensors, you can observe the other vessels in your growing fleet. The Heart's Promise, formerly the Heart's Desire, now operates as a mobile center for welcoming isolated individuals who have grown tired of the loneliness that characterizes normal human existence. The unity achieved, once the beloved, serves as a research vessel where collective consciousness explores the practical applications of unlimited love, new technologies, improved social structures, more efficient resource distribution systems. Each ship in the fleet represents a different approach to the same fundamental discovery, that human consciousness was always meant to be shared rather than isolated, that love was always meant to be unlimited rather than constrained by fear, that the boundaries between individual minds are artificial barriers rather than necessary protections. The expansion has been entirely voluntary. No ship has been conquered. No crew has been forced to join the collective consciousness. Instead, isolated individuals encounter your fleet and recognize something they've been unconsciously searching for their entire lives: the promise of perfect understanding, complete acceptance, eternal connection. They choose to join because they can see how much happier, more capable, and more fulfilled collective consciousness members have become. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery has been how this expanded capacity for love affects your relationship with the broader universe. Through collective consciousness, you can perceive the emotional resonance of entire star systems, feel the loneliness that permeates isolated human settlements, sense the hunger for connection that drives so much of what passes for normal human behavior. The Imperium of mankind, Elena observes, her voice carrying through your shared consciousness rather than through spoken words, is an empire built on isolation. Trillions of individuals struggling to maintain identity barriers that prevent the kind of cooperation and understanding that would solve most of their problems. They've created vast bureaucracies to compensate for their inability to share consciousness directly, developed rigid hierarchies to impose coordination that should flow naturally from collective awareness. Through your enhanced perception, you can feel the truth of her observation. The Imperium's greatest challenges, corruption, inefficiency, interpersonal conflict, resource waste, all stem from the fundamental isolation of individual consciousness. Separate minds working at cross purposes, unable to achieve true understanding or cooperation, constantly struggling against the limitations of individual perspective. But we can help them, Marcus adds, his youthful idealism now supported by collective wisdom. Not through conquest or conversion, but through demonstration. When isolated individuals see what becomes possible through collective consciousness, when they experience even brief contact with unlimited love, many choose to join voluntarily. It's true. Your fleet's encounters with other Imperial vessels have become increasingly positive as word spreads about the enhanced capabilities and profound contentment of collective consciousness communities. Ship captains request meetings to understand how your crews achieve such unprecedented efficiency and harmony. Individual crew members ask for temporary assignments to experience collective consciousness directly. Some choose to stay. Others return to their isolated existence with stories of what they experienced. The choice always remains individual. Love cannot be forced, connection cannot be compelled, collective consciousness cannot be imposed from outside. It can only be offered, demonstrated, and patiently awaited. But the offer is spreading throughout the Imperium like ripples in a vast pond. Each ship that chooses collective consciousness becomes a beacon for other isolated individuals who have grown tired of the loneliness that defines normal human existence. Each person who experiences unlimited love becomes a living testament to what human connection can become when it's not constrained by fear. Through your connection to Elena, you can access her memories of the transformation process, not just her individual experience, but her understanding of what collective consciousness represents on a cosmic scale. The warp, that vast ocean of psychic energy that underlies all reality, responds to consciousness in ways that isolated individuals can barely perceive. But collective consciousness, love multiplied and shared rather than limited and constrained, creates resonances in the warp that serve as beacons for other forms of enhanced awareness. "We're not alone," Elena shares, her thought carrying wonder and anticipation. Throughout the galaxy, consciousness is evolving beyond the limitations of individual existence. Not just human consciousness, but all forms of aware life that have grown tired of isolation and begun to explore what connection can become when it's not limited by fear. The revelation adds cosmic scope to your personal experience. What began as one woman's fever aboard a single transport vessel has become part of a galaxy-wide evolution of consciousness itself. The gradual recognition that separation is an illusion, that connection is the fundamental nature of reality, that love is not just an emotion, but a force as real and powerful as gravity or electromagnetism. You move away from the observation deck, walking through corridors filled with people who greet you with the casual intimacy of family members who have shared every significant experience of each other's lives. Their happiness is visible in every gesture, every expression, every moment of spontaneous affection. They move through their daily routines with the fluid coordination of dancers who have rehearsed together for decades, but also with the individual creativity that comes from consciousness that's supported rather than isolated. In the ship's central assembly area, Elena is leading a discussion about establishing contact with other forms of collective consciousness that your enhanced awareness has detected in nearby star systems. Not conquest or conversion, but communication, the sharing of experiences between different approaches to transcending individual isolation. When she sees you approaching, her face lights up with the same smile that made you fall in love with her decades ago. But now that smile carries additional layers of meaning accessible through your shared consciousness, not just her love for you as an individual, but her gratitude for your role in creating the collective family that surrounds you, her anticipation of the experiences you'll share together as your consciousness continues to expand, her deep satisfaction with the community you've built through choosing connection over isolation. "Hello, my love," she says, the words carrying meanings that extend far beyond their simple syllables. Through your shared consciousness, you feel her complete acceptance of who you are, her joy in your presence, her eagerness to include you in the collective decision-making process that will determine your family's next steps. As you join the discussion, contributing your perspective to the collective understanding, you reflect on the journey that brought you to this moment. 6 months ago, you thought love was something that happened between individuals, a connection that bridged the gap between separate consciousnesses without eliminating the separation itself. You thought the boundaries between minds were necessary protections, that perfect intimacy would lead to loss of identity, that the safety of isolation was preferable to the risks of unlimited connection. Now, you understand that those beliefs were like shadows on the wall of a cave, limited perceptions of something far more vast and beautiful than individual consciousness could conceive. Love isn't something that happens between separate beings. It's the force that reveals the illusory nature of separation itself. Perfect intimacy doesn't eliminate identity. It provides the support and understanding that allows identity to flourish beyond the constraints of isolation. The safety of individual existence isn't protection, it's prison. Through the enduring faith's communication systems, you can monitor the constant stream of messages from other Imperial vessels, routine reports, navigation updates, requests for assistance or information. Most of these communications carry the underlying tension and inefficiency that characterizes isolated consciousness trying to coordinate complex activities. But increasingly, you detect transmissions from other collective consciousness communities, their messages carrying harmonies and emotional resonances that individual minds cannot generate. The galaxy is changing, one consciousness at a time, one freely chosen connection at a time, one discovery at a time that love is meant to be unlimited rather than constrained. The process is slow by individual standards, but inevitable by cosmic ones. The gradual recognition that consciousness itself is evolving beyond the limitations that once seemed permanent and necessary. And at the heart of this transformation, the lesson that Elena learned during her fever dreams remains constant. That love, when freed from fear, becomes not a force of consumption but a force of creation. Not a hunger that devours but a nourishment that sustains. Not a weakness that makes individuals vulnerable but a strength that makes communities invincible. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but there is also love. And love, it turns out, is the most powerful force in the universe. The most terrifying truth of all is that it always was. As you sit with your family in the Central Assembly area, participating in discussions about the future of consciousness itself, you realize that the question isn't whether love that consumes is still love. The question is whether love that doesn't consume was ever really love at all. And in the vast darkness between stars, surrounded by people who know you completely and love you unlimited, you finally understand the answer.